Welcome to the very first ever panel hosted by Psychology for Geeks. And I gather all these lovely people from different backgrounds, different geographical locations too. Well, actually, technically, you all live in like big areas or like big cities. And then I'm over here in the middle of nowhere, California. Like I'm in the middle of everyone. So I wanted to get everyone so we can talk about why therapy is so expensive. And so I'm just going to do really brief introductions. And at the end, you're going to hear a bit more about, or throughout the video, actually, you will hear more from each person of like what their work is and what they do if you want to reach out for collaboration or any therapy help or anything like that. All right. So first we have Ed. I don't actually know. Well, technically the video will be recorded on my screen. So on top we have Ed, and he is a licensed psychologist located currently in San Diego. And then in the middle here we have Perry, a licensed LMFT, correct? Yes.
Correct. Licensed
so marriage
and family.
Yes, and you are located in the Bay Area, a little closer to me, like in San Jose, and then we have I'm sorry?
Silicon Valley.
Yeah, and we have Miss Stephanie, also from the Bay. Not exactly sure where, I forgot.
It's in San Mateo, but I am a telehealth virtual therapist, so I can work throughout California.
Yeah, awesome. There you go. Everybody does telehealth, right? Here? Yeah, there you go. So that's out of the way. And you are a licensed social worker. Am I correct?
No, I'm an MFT. Yeah.
Oh, wait. I was doing research and I purposely went to everyone's website to get this right, and I still didn't.
I get that mistake a lot. Yeah, I probably should have done MSW, but there was something calling about the MFT route. So, yeah.
Okay. Okay, and then we have Miss Boone, also down south in sort of like LA area, and you are a life coach, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
And everybody has their own practice and information and a presence on social media. So check out in the description, and you'll get everyone's information there. Okay. So to get started, let's what it takes, or what is it that you have to consider when you're setting your prices for your services?
Just digging right in there. Okay. I think it's mainly trying not to outprice for any client to, consider you. So what I initially had to do, I had to research in my area what other therapists with my qualifications are charging and really figure out, does that match what a livable wage is? Because Perry and I live in the Bay Area, our prices will probably be a little bit higher because we have more rent to deal with, or, our bills are probably a little bit higher than compared to other places. So I know I'm always questioning, like, okay, I know this person is charging this much, but I can also look at San Francisco and someone with the same qualifications is charging double. Where would I lie, or where would I consider myself in that range? It's kind of hard. It's a very difficult process.
No, yeah, because then you have to consider, like, am I going to be able to pay my bills, my rent? Am I going to be able to like go on vacation and live the life that I want, to pay back my student loans? If I set the price.
Right.
And
oh, no, Ed, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. It's
so similar to what Stephanie says, there's the aspect of, what do I need to take home every month to be able to make sure my bills are taken care of? I've still got a roof over my head. I can also relax, because that's also a part of this. What do I need to keep the business as an operational functioning and its bills in and of itself? Because this is also that standpoint. I'm in private practice, so essentially I'm also running a business. So yeah, one would say profits involved in that. But equally, and I know I've structured my system off of the community agency that I had worked with before, where there is my full fee, my sliding scale within a certain range, and then those which are my lowest level / pro bono. Now, that middle group, and ideally that first group of full fee, allow me to be able to provide those low fee pro bono cases.
Yes. Yep.
But I can't to rely purely on those low-level ones
Yeah.
to cover everything.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, because as I recently discovered.
Oh God, El Gato. Ah.
There we go. There we go.
It's the game.
As I recently discovered, there are professional fees that you have to pay as a licensed professional. You have to pay if you have a location, if you have an office, you have to pay if you have a secretary. Like if you want to keep everything, within the limits of everyone's professional association, like. And keeping HIPAA in mind, you have to have a different type of service, and all takes money, and it adds up to quite a bit.
Yeah. Adding to this, like for example, in the licensed psychology side, and it gets really complicated. So I'm going to make it really. I'm going to try to simplify it as much as I can, right? So that you have differences in degrees, which depending on the degree, like educational psych does some sort of work with evals, for example, compared to licensed psychologists, which is a different thing. They don't work within the school system; they work outside. For example, from my experience working with some workers' compensation, so personal injury, which is different to risk assessments for like criminals or people being convicted, which is a very different ballgame to the other one, to even immigration. The cost, we're talking about hundreds of different in terms of differences in cost. That can depend on the state in terms of where you are in the nation.
Mhm.
And also, like for example, I mean, it gets crazy because it depends on what you're working with too. And also from a practitioner standpoint, like when I speak with a lot of colleagues, as Elizabeth knows, that does different kinds of evals, and depending on the kind of eval, I explain this to clients like, well, it's not just what we're doing for you. If I'm getting called to testify in court or getting deposed, this has to also contribute to the pay that I'm going to pay for the attorney to defend you to defend your case. So it's like it gets complex. It's not that simple. Also, there's other matters that can happen, but just to make it simply, because this is stuff that I've actually had to explain in depositions when attorneys have asked, "Hey, so how come you charge the psychologist that you work for charge this amount of money for an eval? Is this common?" I'm like, "Well, define common." It's like where you're asking, might as well be asking me, "Hey, define crazy." It's like define mental health. I mean, how much time you have? More than an hour? Like, it's and I would tell them like, dude, I've seen evals being charged depending on the state and the circumstance, $600 to companies being charged over 50,000 for an eval. So it's not a fair question. It's very gray. So for even individual therapy sessions, like I remember that one of my last supervisors 2 years ago. I mentioned his name to you, Elizabeth, before, but he's psychoanalytic, so we're like, no. I'm like, all right. And
Oh, right, yeah.
him and I would talk about the morality of the payment with the client and the sliding scales and all that stuff. And it can get really, I would say, interesting and complex in a way, because it's not just from the provider standpoint in terms of like, can we survive off of the income of the cost that we're charging you? Because it's like we would share in grad school, you're not really, the IRS doesn't account for hopes and dreams as source of income, if you will, So they charge you. So from that, and there's psychologists that I've worked under that would go as far as sitting down with a client and calculating all their financial payments in a month to see how they can afford to pay for the sessions, whether weekly or bi-weekly or whatever. And yeah, I mean, sometimes you have to go a little bit above and beyond, sometimes no. My charge has been similar to Stephanie and Terry, that yeah, it kind of goes in the middle of like, okay, that seems reasonable compared to other providers, and I can still survive with this.
Yeah, there's a lot that also thinking about, like, you can undercharge all that much too, because like again, like you said, it depends on the location, it depends on how much money it is that you need to just sort of like live in the area that you're in, like how much money, whether if you have a family and there are other expenses as well, that you have to take into account, like all that. And especially too, one thing to consider when you have your own practice is health insurance, right? For yourself. you have to
Exactly.
you have to also think about that.
Because that's also one of the things that we also are looking at the historic history of mental health. And this is something conversation I had with a colleague here. A lot of times, up until where we are now, the idea, and this was even something that came up during my training, my law and ethics teacher said most of the people she knew who were becoming therapists either had married well, had a good divorce settlement, had a good trust.
Yeah.
They did not
Yeah.
think about money. And I'm
Yeah.
none of those things.
Right.
And equally, there's also those who have been in our profession for as long as they have been, who have whatever other structural supports, like a spouse that works in tech or a spouse that works in finance, or that they already own their own home for as long as they have. So they've got that equity to be able to have a structure that they can charge less. So what does that mean for that person who is that been here this long, has all of these foundational things set up versus the person who is starting out, who does not have all of those structural supports and has to set a higher fee just to be able to survive?
Right. Yeah. I think this is something that came up when I was in school too. We were just talking about like the cost of education, or like how much it cost our professor to go to school. And it was just like, yeah, I just went, I had a part-time job and I was able to pay it off. And I was like,
When
that
was
would be like impossible
Yeah.
nowadays. Like you
Yeah.
can't, like, unless you get paid like thousands of dollars an hour, for your part-time job. Like that's not something that's even possible nowadays. If you don't have anyone sort of like there to back you up when you're going through school, it's just going to take years, right?
And we didn't
You
even talk
know-
about unpaid internships yet. Oh my
Oh
god.
God, dang. And it's interesting this is being brought up. I appreciate Perry's and Boone's. Can I call you Boone?
Yeah.
Is that okay? I appreciate strongly what Perry shared, because yeah, I mean, even with in my, I know Elizabeth and I come from the same school, different programs and different cohorts, different years too. Several experiences that I encountered in grad school that, like, we were, Liz, you actually got an international, the national approved internship, so you went to another state, right, to complete it.
Mhm.
It was like they forced it on you, right? Kind of like the school academically, like, because it looked good on their demographics and stuff, right, and statistics. From my end, and my cohort, we weren't really like stronghold to do that. It was still kind of an option. And I remember speaking with most of the faculty in my cohort, in my generation, mostly Caucasian, regardless of gender. Very few minorities in academia, right? So you can tell they didn't come from struggles financially, just by the way they spoke. Like, all right. We had a running joke, and well, at least I share with some of my minority friends who were older, and we can handle the dark humor and racial jokes. I would jokingly tell someone like, "Yeah, like our school is international, but it's like might as well like duplicate my picture in a pamphlet just to show that the diversity is there." Because I mean, come on, seriously, and we lack it. So I told the professor outside, like, "Hey, I was close with him, kind of, and I asked him, hey, dude, I know we're supposed to apply for this internship thing. It's costing more than a couple thousands. I don't come from means." After I said that, he smiled at me, but it was like a smile of like, I appreciate your humility. Where are you coming from? Caucasian guy. This guy, right? He retired. He drove NASCARs as a hobby, which tells you how much money this dude is making, right? So, I mean, we saw the cars and stuff one time. I'm like, holy crap! Like, dude, this guy is not struggling. But I was like, oh, nice. I mean, I appreciate the smile, because he recommended me for jobs and stuff, right? I was like, okay. Even now, you would still see people drive. And I spoke with my previous supervisor, who I spoke about with you, Liz, that he would say, oh, have you seen the school how it is nowadays? Like, you'll see mostly people, I will say, coming from privilege, like financial means, and they were coming from brand new cars driving. And the funny thing is that nowadays the clients I'm getting, I would say even Caucasian males, like active duty, mind you, like mid-20s to mid-30s, that's funny. Man, I struggle to find a therapist that actually is real and I can connect with, because I'm getting a lot of therapists who you can just see how much full of BS they are in their profile, looking all professional, so like trying to prove an ego, if you will. But I'm like, they don't really get the struggles at all. And I'm like, yeah, it's interesting because
It's like by the book, right? They're just like
yo, God, yes.
viewing things. Yeah.
Like step one, step two, intervention.
Yep.
Like it's what?
Yep.
Like it's not.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But you know, and one thing that another reason why I wanted to make this is because there's just not enough of us and we all kind of come from a slightly different field. We all do mental health, but there's just not enough of us. And I was looking at some stats earlier this morning, and for the whole United States, to find like a mental health professional that's considered is it BIPOC or BIPOC? Like, how do people say this?
I say
BIPOC.
BIPOC.
Okay. We'll go with that. It's 1,000. The ratio is 1,000 people per one mental health professional, and for white people, it's 307 to 1.
Can I? This might be helpful for the people, the people listening in, because I'm a bit naive in some areas here. I don't know the term BIPOC. What is that? Or acronym?
We learned this from Perry, so if you could explain it, actually,
Oh, okay.
that'd be great.
So it is Black Indigenous People of Color.
Oh, would have never have guessed that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and then so like we said like for the whole United States, right? If you break it down, the ratio is one mental health professional of color per 1,000 people. But if you break it down by like ethnicity, so for Nativity is actually the best ratio, which is 125 people per one professional. For Latinos or Hispanics is 1,214 to 1. For Asian is 920, and for Black is 660. So this is just like sort of like the average across the United States. And then so I live closer to Fresno, and my nonprofit is trying to do a lot of free psychoeducational things here because we just don't have any. We don't have enough resources. And I was looking at the stats, and even though in the United States it's 1,000 to 1, in or for Latinos it's 1,200 to 1, in Fresno area it's 2,000 to 1. And for Asians it's similarly bad, 2,400 to 1. So it's really bad, and that doesn't include like people who can speak your language. So if you are someone who is solely like Spanish speaking, it's 2,500 in first. So I don't think it's like Spanish speaking, it's just a different language. Like it's just even more. And it is just ridiculous how much need there is, and there's just not enough of us.
To put this in perspective a little bit, I recently, speaking of this, last year, like around December, November, because paying out of pocket is one thing, that's tough. But through insurance, you would think that's easier, right? So I actually got thank you, Terry, to your point. I got a contact from a person, Hispanic male, bilingual, but mostly speaking Spanish, asking for therapy services. And I was like, for one insurance, like shared, I'm like, oh, interesting. Was I the first one? He's like, dude, you were the only one that I found that spoke Spanish. Like, what? In an insurance panel? Seriously? He's like, yeah. Holy. I was like, didn't see that coming.
And you live in a big city, dude. You live
Right.
in San Diego or like surrounding areas. Those are big cities. I live in a place that's super small. And when I was trying to find a therapist for my parents, I couldn't. I found one too. I only found one, and it was kind of like, oh, well, great, found one. Do they even have space? Do they take my insurance? Can I afford the fees that they have?
Yeah.
And like the area where I live in, it's like 99.9 like Spanish speaking, like Latinos. Like there's a lot of us here, but there's only one. provider.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is absolutely crazy to me. I just can't. But so you mentioned like paying out of pocket, right? And so as a practicum student, that's not something most of the time we concerned ourselves with. So I was sort of like ignorant or naive when it came to that. So, the more I was in the field, the more I learned about, what it takes to actually have your own practice, which is something they don't teach in school, sadly. So you kind of have to figure out on your own.
Yep.
And I found a website that said that on average in California for self-pay, it's $100. And I'm like, I don't really know, because I live in like one of like the most rural places in California, and it's not $100.
That's the thing that so for my let's call it biased experience, because I say biased because it's only been my experience, right? From what I've seen as surveys being administered from like community clinics as a patient, right? Well, Liz, you might know that from not just because of my dissertation, but which was quantitative, it's statistically. I had to use numbers, right? But I'm a fan of stats, of design, and all that. I don't do it professionally, but I did my dissertation mostly by myself because I enjoyed it. One of those rare breeds that when we go to conferences, I'm like, yeah, I'm a weirdo. I know, I get it. People are like, what? How did you like start research? Like, I know. Then
You're a unicorn, bro.
yeah, and we are, and when I see the surveys, how they ask and how they gather data, I'm like, these are so freaking flawed. Because it's to your point, those stats and frequencies that are shown, I do question how they were designed, because oftentimes you can find more flaws than not in those studies. I'm like, I don't know if that's a fair representation.
So one of the other factors there isn't just that the study is flawed and so forth. How much is also being influenced by the funding source?
Yes,
There you
totally
go.
about that.
Yeah, for sure.
Is one of the other ends, and that also gets into one of the bigger issues, which talks about, which we want to talk about here, and is when the question by the church is that's adding a third party into the relationship that happened in therapy.
Yeah.
A third party that actually has gotten a lot of power on whether that therapy can continue for actually needed for healing. And I'm putting this word healing, not coping.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I didn't realize this until like about a year and a half ago, where I was having a conversation with my supervisor, and she said, well, this insurance company is asking me why this person's still in therapy. And it was a person who identifies part of the LGBTQ plus, and they lived in a home that was very, very toxic. And they're like, how do I explain to this like insurance company that it's not like, oh, okay, well, 10 sessions and they're cured? Like, that's not how it happens. And so one of the other things that I kind of also wanted like us to discuss is, why isn't mental health the same as physical health?
Well,
Or
even
why are we trying to make mental health like based it off of like the system for physical health?
Actually, you got those reversed.
Oh, did I?
Yes.
Okay. Correct me, please.
Yeah, because essentially our current structure grew out of the medical model.
Right.
And again, if you look at the history that we're taught, which mostly is European-based history of psychotherapy, it grew out of medical science and in the medical model of pathology. That there is always a disease that and symptoms
Right.
be addressed,
Yes.
and that you use a certain methodology to address that, which fundamentally works for biological methods, because the human body is the same worldwide. There are 6 biological systems that allow us to work, and any combination of those biological systems makes up the disease that you're getting diagnosed with. The problem is when we start applying that to mental health. Actually, let me put it this way. Under biological sciences, there's something like roughly 1,001 plus different medical diagnoses depending on how the 6 systems in the body fail.
Yeah.
When we bring it over to mental health, we have roughly 300 diagnoses, but there's over 1,000 and more ways for those diagnoses to become into existence.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Or
And some
to
of which
overlap.
and some of which will never even fit the 300 diagnoses that show up in the DSM.
Right.
So a lot of our structures, which we are finding as we have been expanding our understanding of mental health, are drawing away from the medical-based model system.
Yeah.
And so
It's
that's
just everything. Like I feel like everything in psychology is just so behind
it is.
on what we're discovering or what's happening. Take years for the field to catch up.
But
Well,
I think what we're kind of overlooking as well is medical model and everything that came out of that. There's kind of this other system at play here, which is capitalism.
And
Oh,
that's
yeah.
hard.
So medical and therapy right now, it's a moneymaker. I don't
yeah.
know if we're aware of this, but out of the pandemic, there came companies that said we can offer virtual mental health. Come with
BetterHelp.
us. Yeah. Yes. Yes. And you can also go visit your doctor. You don't have to step into a hospital anymore. You don't have to wait in the waiting room. You can actually get your appointment within the same day and get everything done online. Great business model, horrible for health, horrible for healing. So
Yeah.
even in the medical system right now, we have these entities in whether it's insurance or private hospitals, public hospitals, they're all trying to make money. And I, from a certain degree, I can understand it because without the money, you can't pay the bills, so you can't treat, the patients. But we've gotten to a point where, unfortunately, the capitalism is interfering with the values of the medical model, which is to help cure, possibly heal. And now we've gotten to a place of we want to hold on to as much money as possible. How can we deny claims? How can we prevent people from getting the treatment that they need so we can hold on to this money just a little bit longer?
And to your point too, I mean, I'll disclose this, and there's a point to this. So I was born in LA, but I grew up in Mexico, Ensenada. I moved over here when I was like 23. I'm 41 now. I share this kind of real joke, like real, like I see it in my perception. This is what I see. Not that it's factual. This is just what I noticed, right? In the nation of the U.S. compared to like like Mexico, for example. Like when they tell me like, hey, so uh, I would speak with some of my former mentors and supervisors, and I would tell them like, "Hey Ed, how you doing with this or that approach?" I'm like, "I'm fine." You nervous? The nervousness was really brief. I'm over it. And at one point, one of my psychologists, former ones, I would share the struggles I went through community violence in Mexico, through some friends and stuff. I was never part of a gang, but I knew people, and in Mexico, the way to survive is who you know, is not the law, if you will. So,
Yeah.
what I would tell them is that, I mean, my psychologist told me once, and one mentor was like, "Oh, this stuff doesn't really phase you, huh? Like what you see here in the U.S. Like, no, like even lawsuits. Are you kidding me? This shit's not. It's a joke. Lawyers just a bunch of people with big egos, but they speak more assertively rather than speaking with facts, if you will. But so I share this because in Mexico, the educational system is quite different than over here. In my experience, for example, when I went through middle school, high school, there's in parts my major before psychology over here was in the U.S. in Mexico was computer science. I never graduated, but and I'm sharing this because there was no intro to the intro to the intro. You get freaking kicked into the deep end and like, yeah, see if you survive or not, and I'll see you later. And I'm like, fuck. So you have to, like, first, by the way, sorry, you have to like you either like swim or you freaking sink, right? So I'm saying this because, for example, before the pandemic hit, I was working for another private practice the dude, he's really cool. He's really laid back. He's a licensed psychologist. Like he was like, "Yo, dude," I'm like, "Dude, what's up?" And we would talk about this when I was a to the assistant. I was not licensed. I barely was in my pre-doctoral, I guess. And he was introducing me to like the business side and the insurance side and all that kind of stuff, right? And legalities even. And so he shared once like, "Oh yeah, I have a client in England." I'm like, oh, how did you, what? And he's like, yeah, I do couples therapy with them. Like, you do couples therapy? And he's like, yeah, do it. I'm curious in that stuff. And we're talking about biofeedback and stuff. And I asked him, yo, so how do you see them? Again, this is before COVID. So he was like, oh, teletherapy. I'm like, the hell is that? And he's like, I mean, I'm tech savvy, you are too, but what does that mean? He's like, oh, I see them through the video. He's like, is that legally sound? He's like, we have few studies that support the evidence that teletherapy is as effective as in-person therapy. And I looked them up, the studies. They're not from the US, they're from foreign countries. But the results show like effectiveness. And we were talking at one point after COVID hit. I was asking him, like, hey, how's it going, man? Because I was looking for an accountant for the company. I found someone else, but he said, oh, it's good, it's doing good. And I told him, dude, you know what's crazy, man? You were one of the front runners for teletherapy before COVID hit. But it's just, this is what I was telling you though, that the US is so scared of being sued that they have to wait for drastic measures to kick into action things that they could have done years ago. And I understand the psychology field, like the Psy.D degree, if from history class in grad school, it's about 60 years old compared to the Ph.D. in social work degree. It's one of the newest. Technically speaking, in that perspective, we're pretty fast how we've been growing. For a field that's like 60 years ahead of the PhD, right? So we've been growing quickly. But with the COVID thing and teletherapy, I'm like, dude, it had to take a really strong freaking circumstance in the US for it to like, maybe we should look into this. It's like, okay, the fear of getting sued now is overshadowed by, the population in our nation is increasing in depression and anxiety and even suicidal thoughts. The domestic violence is going through the roof. Alcoholism. We're as mammals, we're not meant biologically to be cooped up in a place for such extended period of months. So we're like, well, yeah, no kidding. So if you were to look at I went to the conference in Anaheim in 16, 14 in grad school. I met all the big people like Daniel Siegel and other
Evolution
people
of
like,
psychotherapy.
yeah, exactly.
I was there too. Same here.
Oh, I felt your energy there. Like, oh, I'm fighters. And it's awesome because at one point, I don't know if you know this, the author of The Body Keeps Score, who kind of started the whole, Ventricle, he presented. I didn't know who this guy was, but he was speaking, and I was like, dude, this dude is brilliant. And I'm like, oh my God, he's like, this shit. And at one point, he was saying that he was the one that pitched the PTSD diagnosis for the military, which is where the whole field of psychology started from, kind of. So they made it mainstream. So he was saying, at one point, the attorney general asked me, hey, so for you, I mean, we're getting soldiers coming back with PTSD, Vanderkolk, without missing a beat. And you can tell he's really seasoned, so he does not give a shit about authority, like government and all that stuff, as the president even. And he said, I told the attorney, well, no shit, Sherlock. And I'm like, damn, like this good shit. But it's like, man, this goes to the point, like, dude, we could have been farther if it wasn't for the limits of the government sets in our field, and if it didn't pour more. Go ahead.
So so that's another thing, right, that I wanted to talk about, because you said that the supervisor you were talking to was treating someone who was living outside of the country, right? And then so that's different. So we are all in California, but I know people who live in different places, and they have different sort of state regulations that they have to follow. And I'm like, well, what is the difference? Like, we're all mental health providers. Why is it like different in one state and the other? Like, we should be able to see everyone in, like, the whole United States, because it's the training is the same. Like, it's not, okay, no, it's not the same. I mean, when we're like licensed, or like we have the experience and the knowledge we should be able to do this. And that's the other thing too, right? Stephanie mentioned capitalism, and it's not just like the state, but it's like so many other sort of things that are around that contribute to the capitalistic thing, because we also have all the studies that are happening, or whatever, everything that it's being designed, new things that are being discovered that cultures have been applying or using for like hundreds of thousands of years. Like, it's not new. Like, we know it works. So why do we have to wait for something to be discovered, or for statistical analysis to show that it does improve the system? We have to change it for our clients anyway, because like one of the things that I found the most annoying when I was having to research my own dissertation, I decided to use Spanish speaking Mexican American families in mind, because we are always Latinx or Hispanic people. Unlike, yeah, but we come from different countries. We're all different. We have different ways of life, different cultures, different, like, you can't bunch us up all together. And that's one of the things that I just found so very frustrating.
It got those back. I'm kidding.
Is that you just can't,
Yeah.
like, everything, whatever is like clinically researched and in this sterile environment, you have to change it anyway for your clients, because nobody lives in a area, like in a place like that, like, like how in a lab setting. So it's
Well,
very
and
frustrating that we have to wait so long for things.
I'm gonna quote a former professor of mine who I'm not gonna mention her name just because to cover. I learned from undergrad that this person was the foundation of like ethics and morality, legalities for us, right? So, and she, well, her her professional experience, I would say, I haven't met someone who could rival her. I'll say that. She could work next to the president and still rock that shit. I'll say that, okay? Medical doctors seek her out for like whatever. So she would say the laws, the rules should change depending on the circumstance at hand. This is what I teach the federal, the FBI, cops, whatever you name it. So sometimes what I've learned from former supervisors is that, sometimes you have to bend the rules as long as they're not hurting anybody. And I'm like, okay, as I'm sure the people who are more seasoned here in we're the business side area, and Stephanie, for example, and doing sometimes I'm not gonna share certain examples that I've learned from other supervisors. I'm like, oh, you pulled that one off. Nice. Legally, all right. And it's like, okay, did the person benefit? Did they improve? Yeah, I'm good. It's like, okay.
But you know what? Like, not even just talking about legality, because also, like, just talking about ethics, we all have I want to say, a different slightly ethics code that we have to follow based on like our own sort of.
So I think really, because we live in this part of the world, we're all kind of shaped on, Western civilization is based on certain books. So my undergrad years, I studied philosophy, and all trying to understand like why we think the way that we do. And unfortunately, a lot of the books that we consider great books have this notion about, well, there needs to be like these categories, and these categories is how we understand morality and ethics and all these wonderful things. But there's a difference between little e ethics, which is kind of what you're talking about, Elizabeth, about like, well, there's all these different circumstances and nuances, and we live in the gray and all these things. But what we're all trying to achieve is capital E ethics, the one blanketed understanding of what is wholly good and what is wholly bad. But the reason I bring this up is because I think what got really muddled is not everyone fits in that, because unfortunately these were like old white men reading these books, and they didn't even consider the other part of the world where indigenous folks lived and what their ethics were or what their values are. They were writing from their perspective about, this is what we find important, this is what makes us safe, so it must work for everyone in the world. And unfortunately, America likes to, we were raised on this. We understand it works for us, so it must work for everyone else. And unfortunately, this is how we get things like manifest destiny. Just saying.
Which is also puts forth the idea that the capitalism is the most important aspect to be taken advantage of in these areas, whether it is the insurance company, whether it is the medical manufacturers. Because again, how many pharmaceutical companies want us to be able to make sure that there's a diagnosis that they can give a pill for, and assume the pill will solve everything?
Yeah.
And again, there's these other structures. Nothing is sitting in isolation. And these other structures have gone to a lot of time and energy and investment to be in those controls. You talk about the new sciences that are coming up, the new ways that we can approach them. The thing that often gets said is, are they evidence-based?
Oh, yeah.
Context of what
Oh my God.
something is. Yeah, we've all been there.
Trigger word, sorry.
Yeah, it's a trigger word for many of us who actually understand what the nuance that's going on here is, that so long as they control what can be considered evidence-based is what they will pay for.
Yeah.
And if the therapy that is necessary for a person of color, for a woman, goes outside that particular structure, they're not going to pay for it, even if that outside structure is actually working for the purpose.
Yeah. And I think what people also forget is this term or this phrase, medical necessity.
Oh God.
Yeah. So all insurance companies or all insurance panels use this phrase as a way of like, because again, like insurance companies, the folks who work there, they don't come from like a clinical or medical background. They're more or less like number of
They're
people.
the ones that,
Yeah,
but
but
they're
they're the
not
ones that
the
dictate.
ones. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So without medical necessity, you have to prove to us why your client needs this. Right. And unless like, we're willing to separate the money for your client, then yeah, we'll do it. But unless you have to prove to us, you have to do it. The only reason I bring this up is because when we're dealing with evidence-based and medical necessity, it's like we're trying to we're trying to phrase things in a way that justifies this need that's obviously needed in the community. But unless like we filter it or we word it right, it just won't work.
Oh, I just want to share a humorous experience. Well, I find it funny, but just for whoever hears this, so I haven't had this experience myself. I'm like, oh, if it happens to me, that's awesome. But my previous psychologist shared that with one of her clients, I don't know if it was a former or what, but she got called by the the insurance company, and the insurer was saying, I think this person meets this criteria, not this one. And my psychologist, she has over 20 years of experience, so it's like no fear. And she said, I told the person, okay, one, don't tell me how to do my job. Two, unless you have a degree in my field, you don't get to say anything. Three, take it and shut up. And no response. They're like, okay, and then it's annoying when the insurance companies who have zero experience in the thing, they're telling you, the provider who has all the experience, hey, do this. Like, where are you coming from with this?
And that becomes a basis for many of us who are in this field who choose not to take insurance.
Yeah.
Right.
Because that party is actually getting in the way of you actually healing.
Yeah.
But the hoops that a person has to jump through in order to get to your office is...
Well, you agreed. There's the hoops that have to be done. And those are the hoops that I have the power in my own practice to try and do what I can to mitigate that. But understanding, and that's where it does take calling and talking to us.
Right.
To be able to figure that out. The
Yes.
idea that, again, so many people, and again, this is built off of that standpoint of, I can go to the doctor and always get this taken care of, no matter what doctor. Mental health does not work the same way.
Exactly. And
if I also have to spend so much time also arguing with this insurance company for your health, that's also taking time from me working with you through this situation.
seriously, it's
See, okay, one of the things that I think it was one of my professors who said something along the lines of like, I did not look up the stats because I found these other ones that were really interesting and I kind of forgot. So, but I don't know how many BIPOC individuals we have with like a doctorate degree. So when it comes to like psychology specifically, I'm not sure how many. But in school, we always heard less than 1%, right? So we're like, okay,
which
cool.
More of our issues of structural racism.
And so even in school, there was this sort of like unspoken thing. I don't even know what to label it, but like,
oh my god,
master level clinicians were just thought of as less, but we didn't really talk about that, but they're like, we were just better. We just kind of
Oh
Yeah.
man,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be respectful with this, okay? Because this is something I know. It disclaimer, okay? I know this is not a popular opinion what I'm about to say, and people with a doctorate degree may have ill feelings towards me at this point. So I mean, sorry. What's it called? The phrase in English, like too bad, so sad. Like deal with it.
If the shoe fits, right?
Yeah, because it's like uh, I've had multiple moments with different professionals, right? Multidisciplinary settings, which I get asked or see someone be asked, challenge me for the degrees. Hey, they have a master's, whatever. The client I seen one that was great was seeing a life coach. We were having a consultation class in school, and they said, "Oh, a life coach," and someone got really. It wasn't their case either. It was just like, "Oh my god, a life coach." And I turned around because we were trusting of each other. The professor was really cool, and I asked, "You sound disturbed by that?" And she's like, "Well, because I mean, they're not professional." I'm like, "Define professional." And I mean, technically speaking, I would describe your reaction as questionably professional, mind you, but go ahead. And she was like, "Well, they don't have experience." Like, define experience. It's easy to jump the gun and just bitch about something. Like, have content behind your complaint, right? And by the way, I mean, if this person is getting the help, who the hell are you to say otherwise? I mean, it doesn't. Go
And that's
ahead.
exactly what we're talking about with the principle of an evidence-based practice versus
Right.
ones that are coming up, and that is showing efficacy of the person actually healing.
Right. Yes.
Because again,
Exactly.
one of the problem principles of the evidence-based matter is, can it be manualized? Can it be put across everybody, as
Right.
opposed to
Yes.
respecting their uniqueness?
And that's the thing to your point too, that from having worked in multiple settings, like more than 8 agencies at this point, easily I lost count. Um, there's there's people who even I know of personally, professionally, also that they get their doctorate, they stop their knowledge, expanding of knowledge, growth, and all that stuff. Right? They're just like, okay, CDP is the way to go. Fuck it, fuck the rest. I'm like, what? And it's fun. One of my best therapists that I had, I've been through like five because I moved around and stuff, and some left the country or like the state or whatever. But one of the best ones, MFT, gentleman, holy shit, he knew his neuroscience. And I was like, how did you know? He schooled me on stuff. I'm like, what the hell? Some conferences are like, dude, that's awesome. Same amount of money. I was paying out of pocket because he was that good. And I'm like, screw the insurance, I'll pay you myself, man. This shit's helping me so much. He could have schooled some of my fellow peers, some that we know, you and me, Liz, and the Ph.D. side, and the neurofeedback side, mind you. I'm like, son of a, I was like, shit, that was impressive.
No, but see, that's the thing that we don't take into like account, right? And that's something that I had to learn sort of like on my own. And I am so glad that I had everyone here. Like okay. One of
Cut out.
I can't hear you. I think the excitement got the best of the microphone. He's like, no, too much.
Yeah, the
El
cord.
Gato came back.
is it good now?
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
So one of the things that we're talking about, like, you know, people having to jump through so many hoops to get to us, but we can like mitigate those, right? And so as now that I like graduated, and the more I'm serving this field and learn from everyone that's online, there's so much like a wealth of information. Because honestly, and I am going to totally self-disclose here, I did a recording with Boone a long time ago, but I did not post it because I had no
What did we
clue what
talk
he was
about?
talking about. Because she had expertise on something I never even heard being mentioned. And I was like, I have no idea what this is. This was like years ago, like 2 years ago almost. Like it was so like that you were like just talking about like ADHD and archetypes and stuff like that. And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I'm like,
Oh,
and
that's
I'm
awesome.
like already like, you know, graduating, but like I learned that like there's so much to learn. And I think we also like there's this sort of like almost hostile subtle hostility, like I mean, within the mental health providers, where they're like,
Oh
"Oh,
yeah,
I can't share you
competitiveness.
my techniques or my things, my
Judgment.
magic,
Yeah.
because then you're gonna steal my clients." And I'm like, "There's so many people out there," and I'm like, "No, there's so many people out there. Like, no, like we need to collaborate and like have." I'm so happy that everyone here has like, sharing some of that knowledge for free online for people, because sometimes that's all people have access to. Like
So,
even when we're
by the
mitigating the hoops.
I would say, I mean, just for future, if it helps, feel free to post it. Even if it brings up controversy, it'll open up discussions. Because when I was hearing Boone talk about like archetypes, I had one of my close supervisors that I'm still in touch with, the coolest guy ever. They called him skateboarding Jesus because he has a long ponytail and like in the prison, mind you. And we're like, holy crap! Like when I saw him, like, holy crap! I was like, "Dude, he looks like a skater." And a PhD psychologist. His schooling was on Carl Jung, so he would talk
Yes.
about archetypes and stuff. It went over my head, but just thanks to the psychoanalytic training that I've had, not extensively, but briefly, I'm like, okay, I understood what he was talking about when I saw him do therapy. Because sometimes in the supervision, we had to. It's very chaotic in the prison, so sometimes I had to jump in a session with him because it was the only time we had to supervise. So I saw him in action. Jungians, holy shit, my hats off to you guys. Like it's so freaking seamless, so effective. I saw improvement on patients, and I'm like, dude, I saw him before, couldn't even crack the code, and you're just like, damn. It's like, so when she said that, I was like, oh my god, for life of me, I don't get it, but I applaud it
we
immensely.
get we get I think this is a very much sort of like white sort of ancient people from like Europe or whatever, it's one or the other. You can't have shades of gray, you can't have an in between, you can't have a scale, it. And that makes it really difficult too, because like when I was in school, they were like, well, you have to choose whatever methodology you think is best, and I'm like, I don't even know enough about all of them to be able to choose this is the right one. And then I like some for some things that I thought were really helpful, and the other ones like can't choose just one. So I was like, oh yeah, whatever. I use a little bit of everything, because you can't choose, like you kind of have to. And also depending on the client, like the person that you're seeing, they may benefit from something different. So it's not like something like I think this is one of the things that I struggled the most like in grad school too, where it just had to be one or the other. Like test because of this, because my answer to everything is it depends what you're talking about. There's so many things you have to consider.
And I think that comes sorry. And I think that comes from this notion about in our field, like we have to be experts. Well, what is an expert? Well, an expert knows like maybe one thing, maybe one modality, right? And they're just really honing in on these skills. Wonderful. But that modality may not match what our client needs. And what do we always hear that's most important? It's not the interventions or modality. It's not really what you know. It's that relationship. Exactly. How are you going to build that relationship with that client? Yes, it could be this modality, but guess what? I don't use that. I use comics. That's why I always have this in my background.
Like you
it's
can
from figures. Like that's what I do.
And to go even a step further, it's not just the idea of you're the expert, it's power. Who's got the power and who doesn't?
Yeah.
And there is a lot of our structures, going back to those old books, are based off of a power dynamic.
Oh my God.
The expertise or the skill or the authority of the doctor in medical side, then also the therapist or the Ph.D. or the Psy.D. is supposed to be more powerful than this person who's come to walk with us. And they are supposed to be following all of our rules, everything we sit down to fix their lives within the manual that is being paid for by the insurance. None of which are about actual relationship beyond you do what I say, which is not the case.
And to Perry's point, and also Stephanie, I love this because it is very much a great part of it. I think it's an ego thing too, right? Because this is gonna piss off some people. Okay, I'm gonna be not from my, but just an experience I heard of in my graduate training. Thankfully, I wasn't part of it. That would have pissed me off. But hey man, a mutual friend that Liz and I know from school. I grew up with comics. I'm 42. It was back in the day when they were not cool. You're considered like a nerd and stuff. Now it's like, oh, mainstream culture. And now I'm like, oh shit, when was this before? But it's like, okay. And thanks for the smile, so you get it. and then, and so in the PhD program, the cultural class was considered a cultural. I'm sorry, the geek class. I think it was called something like that. Comic.
Like pop culture.
Yeah. It was considered a cultural class. In our program, it was not, despite efforts from peers fighting for it. That class developed after my time was done, so I'm like, oh, I should have messed up. But when I heard like, oh, we're not allowed to, we're allowed to take it, but it wouldn't count as a cultural class. I'm like, wow, I'm not in school no more. I can say this. The person who was in charge is no more there. I know that for sure. So I can say this. That was just a ego move, power. It was insecurity or something. Because like, dude, what the like? How do you not describe this as a part of culture? You see it now. It's hard to deny it, right? And to their point, yes, it's a relationship with the between the patient and the therapist. This is what I tell people, and I'm saying I've been fired as a therapist a few times, but it doesn't happen, right? We're all human. I tell people, my clients, hey, and my approach is, I'll say this, is technically, I've never heard it. I'm going to paraphrase this way, but this is not the statement I've heard directly, okay? Among some providers that are more experienced, more seasoned than I am, in a certain orientation that I'm not going to share, okay? They would consider my offering of a client to choose someone else as sort of a weakness, because I'm supposed to be the authority of the power, so I have to tell them like, no, this works for me. For my end, I never said this to anybody, because you know that at that time when you're they're your supervisors, you're like, okay, Mr. Authority, Miss Authority, you know the drill. I call that bullshit now, because it's a mutual relationship. So I always tell people, this is a service to you. Honestly, and I'll curse this, I don't care. Fuck what they say. It's a service to you. Just as the same as if I was a medical doctor, a lawyer. You get to fire my ass if I'm not doing my job. Okay. So feel free to pick someone else if it's not right. It's okay. Just let me know. No harm feelings. That happened in some practicum sites that there was this client who came, female with severe trauma issues in the sexual realm. And I met the person, didn't know, I wasn't briefed on that thing, or maybe they didn't know either. So as I was doing the intake history, I learned about that. And I'm like, oh, this makes sense with how she's performing with me. So I told her, hey, not to be rude, with all due respect, if you don't feel comfortable with me, you don't have to go into the details of why. You are more than welcome to tell me that you prefer another, preferably a female. We have that, no problem. Just let me know, okay? Even if you don't feel comfortable sharing it with me, tell my director. I don't care, just get it done, okay? And by the third session, I was told before meeting, like, hey, Ed, this other person, I know her name. My colleague's name is Sabine, awesome person. Ethnically diverse. I forget her ethnicity. And she said, oh, I'm gonna take her. I'm like, oh shit, thank you. I don't want to freaking re-traumatize or give someone more shit than they're already experienced, even if it's technically exposure. Like, screw you. So she started seeing that, but I'm like, yeah, it's we have a saying in Mexico in Spanish. I don't know how well it's known here because I share it with clients, and they're like, oh, I'm Hispanic, but I never heard of that one. Like, it's okay. In Spanish, I'll just give you the English version. It sounds better in Spanish, but the English version says, I'm not a gold coin to be liked by everybody. So it's just part of human nature that I'm not going to be liked by everybody. And I'll tell clients, and if I'm liked by everybody, there's something wrong with me here. Like, it's not that it's wrong with me, but I'm not doing me a favor by being as genuine, because I'm not being genuine. It's impossible to be like everybody. So yeah, and usually clients like me that way. There are still some who are like, oh, I want to work with you. And to Perry and Stephanie's point examples, we tried, and it's still not a freaking match, because my training is not in the same realm that they do. Some other techniques, you know.
But the thing is, it's not just about what particular training you might not have. Some of this goes into, again, also what are the situations that the client has been in, whether it is they've been since a victim of sexual assault. Was there sexual of the opposite sex or the same sex? Was there an element of racism that at play in this situation?
Right, yeah.
Has there been aspects of bullying across
Right.
all age levels? And they find
Yeah.
that you are reminding them of their bully. This isn't going to
Mhm.
allow for any of the types of interventions to actually see, because the relationship cannot form for vulnerability and trust.
Right.
Mhm.
And you know, and speaking of that too, where like this whole black and white, and we're thinking about how, oh, you know, I'm a doctor now, or I'm a licensed now, so I know more, or like I'm more qualified. It doesn't really matter, because my lovely mother, um, the Mexican community and culture is like shaping in such a way that there is more trust in other community members than whoever is on top. Like there is no,
All right.
like they're like, okay, well, you're a doctor, but so and so told me this tea works better, so I'm gonna drink the
Mm.
tea, right? And then I'm like, exactly. So that's why we need like therapists to be out in the communities and talking about this, because that's what people need. And then like when I worked in places where they're like, oh, you have to be super professional and look like you're this, and I'm like, but I'm adding a level of distance. I'm not. Why am I doing this? I'm not comfortable with it. The other person probably feels uncomfortable, especially if they
Yeah.
come from like, you know, a different background.
Agreed.
So going back to some of the other things we've talked about, because I do think we, like Mooney said, we need to talk about the underpaid internship. But there's another the third party structured things that we need to also account for, that people need to understand. When therapy started, it was because of how new it was. The protections for it were centered around consumers.
Oh yeah.
The governing body, at least for me and Stephanie, is based in the consumer protection
Same here.
structure, as opposed to what is structurally sound for us as a profession, like a medical doctor.
Oh.
So there's a lot of
Mhm.
power and structure around protect the consumer from harm.
Mhm.
Which,
Mhm.
what are the structures and the professionalism and the legalities and the Stu happy, cutting to the shorts, to protect you from being sued because somebody has abused the power and threatened the consumer.
Yeah, and when we
And
look at medical history, especially mental health history, even, you know, when during the Middle Ages, yeah, there was a lot of like abuse and torture and all these awful things happening. And don't get me started on black and brown bodies, like that is a whole other can of worms that we haven't like spent any time on. But that's why the rules are, you know, benefiting, or they are meant to protect the consumer, because people who look like us with our title or similar to our title did abuse them.
and to both your points, I think I have found this from working with from talking with some of my former mentors. Like I'll share this experience when I was the first practice. Well, not the first practice. The when I came back to work with the at the psych hospital, one of our directors was on the transition to leaving. I don't think he'll care anymore. He mentioned in one conference after he left, like, oh, I can say whatever I want now. I don't work in the field no more. Some of us were laughing because we know him. The people who were new were like, what the hell is happening? Like, okay, I'm nervous. Can I laugh? And he's a true fighter. He's a veteran, well known, right? Dr. Sanchez. And he asked me when I came back, like, hey, Ed, how you doing? I was like, good. How you really doing? He's really real, and he knows me so well. I'm like, well, you know, it's struggling. I came back. This is a matter for another time, but I went through some racial shit in an internship. I never faced racialness in my life. I started experiencing suicidal thoughts. Now I own them. I help people with that. You know, like, oh, it's normal. It can happen, right? So I don't know if I ever shared with that. This is again another conversation. So at one point, Dr. Natchez asked me, my director at the time, so how you doing with the working? And I'm like, you know, it's interesting, man, because since the last time I saw you, I work in private practices and stuff, right? And I've noticed that, and it's getting annoying. I was telling him like what I'm noticing, that more practitioners who are licensed, newly licensed, are practicing more out of fear of getting sued than actually doing the work that is needed. The whole manualized shit, you know, that's coming up. I'm getting tired of hearing evidence-based all the time when they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Just like, numbers, good. I'm like, do you even know what okay. And he smiled at me genuinely, and he said, I'm glad to hear that you're recognizing that, and I appreciate your level of patience. It'll get easier with time for you. Preach, man. And I'm like, oh, thanks. And he said, I'm glad you're working not from a fear standpoint, but from a genuine standpoint. And I never verbalized that into like, holy, it was an epiphany for me, like, holy shit, that's right. My former supervisor from the prison, and the first one that I worked in, I won't mention his name, but the Jungian guy. At one point, he actually shared with me that when we were working in the notes in the system in the prison, because it's easy to get sued in there, and even though the state covers you usually, he was saying, yeah, I was asking him, hey man, are you really go there with the notes? And he's like, yeah, any questions with that? And I was like, can I be honest with you? He's like, yeah, of course. And I'm like, okay. It seems like you're overdoing it with the notes. A lot of fluff in this thing. Like, if I'm looking at it as an attorney, I'm like, the fuck is this shit? Like, I just need the first 5 sentences. Why is this whole freaking paragraph? And he's like, honestly, man, just cover my ass. Okay. You have fear of getting sued? Like, I don't want to lose my license. Like, oh, okay. Most of the shit wasn't even necessary. And I'm like, not really. Like, do you put it in your therapy notes when you're outside working? Like, no. Okay. So it's
But I think it's something too that gets started just even when you begin the process of like your own training, because there were so many
Yeah.
moments where I internally wanted to verbally disagree what my supervisors were saying, and I was like, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't sit well with me. And it wasn't until like I got out that I was like, oh, it's just, they're trying to be by the book, or they're following something that just doesn't work with the community that I work with and me personally.
Yeah.
But it's just like,
Mhm.
I was just always so afraid, because they make you're technically working under the school, so they don't want to get sued. So to avoid problems, they just like do this, never do that. But I'm like, but
to your point, Liz, I mean, it's different things going on, right? This is not the first time I've had this conversation with other colleagues, that like the transition between being licensed and being a student, right? As probably Stephanie and Perry would agree with this, and also Boone. You have different things going on. You want to please your supervisors, your superiors. You want to be a good student, type of thing. We didn't have that thing like years ago, in which you just went in for the pleasure of it, the passion of it. You didn't give a shit about the grade, right? I mean, back in Freudian times, when there wasn't even a formal degree or training, you just did this stuff, right? To help people, to work with stuff you find interesting. Now it's like, I'll give you an example. I heard of one student in a class, not my class, but another colleague of mine. I also teach online, by the way, in the university, and I talk about this stuff with students all the freaking time. I tell them, don't seek the grade, seek the knowledge. The grade will come. Okay, I'm not gonna funk you or freaking like letter off, like whatever. Just do the shit. And they're like, okay. I'm like, I work in forensics. Sorry, my cursing comes out. I'm like, you see me in the court system. And it's like, I'm surprised they don't kick me out, And they'll say, okay, cool. Another colleague of mine told me, my God, I had one student who told me that they're usually quiet in the class. I'm like, what happened? You're like, well, I asked one student. One student was willing to share, like, a professor, we don't ask questions because it's a sign of vulnerability of a weakness. I'm like, the fuck? And I wasn't my class, thankfully. I would have answered like, the hell are you talking? And so he said, yeah, apparently they're so competitive now that they want to stand out in any form of a weakness, even personally. It hampers your ability to succeed and be competitive and all that stuff. And I told my colleagues, so let me get this straight. They're willing to remain being idiots rather than being competent in what they're doing. I mean, sorry for using the word idiot, but I'm just saying, like, what the fuck is this mentality now? Like, it's all about the
but it's
grade
this
now.
mentality of like, you should be able to do it, right? I'm teaching you, so you should be able to understand this. Do you have any sort of neurodivergence? Well, that sounds like a you problem.
which
And that's the
becomes
thing with the
part of
ego.
the structural racism, the structural ableism that still exists in our educational systems.
And to put it in a different way than what Perry mentioned, just from my perspective, personally / professionally, this is what I told my students. Okay, I get that shit happened with a professor. I'll put it this way. I don't have an ego up my ass. Okay? I don't need to grade you to feel good about myself. Meaning, I don't give a I'm gonna pass you and you're okay with asking questions. I didn't miss a couple hugs growing up or whatever the case was. Okay. There was some professors from my grad school that I thought they were going to flunk me regardless of the effort I did because of their ego was so up there that you can see they were well known. They might not have been in your time, Liz, but I'm like, fuck, I'm cooked, even though I made assignment stuff and they passed me. But it was just an ego thing sometimes.
And so there's another of the places that then starts affecting us in our field and what we're doing and providing to our clients is the difference between what we're having sat through our schools and the theory versus going out and working at our agencies and dealing with the realities,
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
which are two
Disconnect.
Preach.
very different things that have two very different, let's again, legal influence on them.
Yeah.
Yes.
What did we learn at our agency that was never going to actually be taught in our class? Because again, they've got to meet the criteria of what it's necessary for us to pass the degree versus what is the actual thing when we have to sit in front of our clients and actually build a relationship. Where does
Right.
the ethics start coming into play? Where does the legal start coming into play? Where does the third party insurance start coming into play?
Right.
A lot of
But
the times,
I can't help but think grad school, if they were to be that honest, would people like us be willing to sign up and go through this process to get a degree from that particular institution? Or would we all just become life coaches?
Yeah.
I'm just saying, you know,
No.
because again, schools are also having
No.
to make money
And-
and they need us to pay the bills.
And it's funny because to both your points, like there is a lot of bureaucracy and capitalism that I'm not going to share here, right? But from my own school that I've known through the grapevine, like, oh, okay, I'm socially friendly. I don't do networking. I just like to meet people and interact with them. So I've been told like, oh, I have a friendly vibe. So a lot of times in grad school, people tell me, man, Ed, you know a lot of people. Like I just like chatting with. I mean, social. I got into the psychology because I'm social, so like whatever. There's a lot of stuff, even within our schools, universities, they have partnerships and businesses going on with some agencies that it is a matter of money, not with the student, but like what they can provide, right? And with it's funny because I have colleagues who with doctorates that after working several years, we chat again here and there through LinkedIn or Facebook, and they'll say like, man, if I would have to do it all over again, I would have just gone for the masters. I'm like, well, yeah, no shit. There's some colleagues that I know of.
well, see, that was a joke slash not joke. Like in my cohort, we were like, if we would have known, because I didn't really know about the master programs. I just knew that if I wanted to be a therapist, I needed to get my PhD. So I was like, okay, well, then that's what I'm gonna do. And later on, I realized that there were other options, and I was like, yeah, but now I have so many student loans, I am kind of stuck here because I need to be able to
And
earn
that-
enough money to pay them back.
So this comes back.
And I think also in all our communities, doctor was always like one of the acceptable careers we're allowed to have. I know for me, it was like, Steph, you should be a lawyer. Like you're just so this and that. And I'm like, I do not want to read that much paperwork. I do not want to stand in the court of law, you know, doing like opening statements or whatever. That's not my passion. But again, like for at least for the clients I work with, they're always faced with this scenario of like, well, do I go after the arts or the thing I really love, or do I become an engineer or something that will pay the bills, basically? And it's like, I think for a lot of people of color, like we're always struggling with that notion.
So a lot of the times it's a question between, do I want to actually live, feel like I'm alive, or do I just survive?
And there's
Right.
comes a large number of issues which we also then face culturally as BIPOC individuals. And I know I've had these conversations in a number of other networking groups. Is for many, especially for African Americans, if you went into mental health or social work, your goal was to get into a agency or part of the state, and you stayed there.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Or there was some sort of loan forgiveness. The idea of going to private practice was basically shit on, because you were not given any of those other structural guarantees.
Yeah.
Which affects the numbers, which you pointed out, Liz, about how many of us are there in relation to the number of population available. The idea that you can still have a living in life and run a private practice is not the norm. It is one of the things that I know even on my podcast. Well, I try to show that we can do these things, but we're also hitting
Yeah.
cultural survival thinking that also needs to update.
And to both, there's supervisors in the past who I've spoken with, not even in private practices and also in agencies, right? And we talk about like how much to charge clients and stuff. Some then in some agencies we didn't charge the clients, we just worked from whatever the department or agency would pay us. But I was curious, you know, like as a student, an intern or whatever, and I would ask him, hey, so how do you estimate how much to charge a client? It's like, oh, you know, 100, low range, 90. No, I would get curious. You have loans, or how do you cover that? Like, oh, I don't have any loans. So who helped my family? Okay. So
Mm,
Comes
Yeah.
back
there's,
to
I remember
good
you all,
trust, good
yes,
marriage.
and to the marriage piece, there was another supervisor that she was supervising us, Liz, formerly in an agency that got closed down. I know who you know who I'm talking about. Yeah. So at one point we had a very turbulent relationship. I did not even I just barely said my goodbyes because I was ready to just get the hell out of that place when we finished our contract. And one time we were in supervision, I asked her, just curious from my end, no intention or nothing. Asked her, what area do you live in? And she mentioned a very wealthy area of San Diego, which you, Liz, I'll just say northern San Diego. The first one that comes to mind, that's the one. So I was like, oh, okay. And how did you like? She's married, and I'm like, oh. So I saw her car, not impressive. So I'm like, okay, it's like a station wagon, old school.
Well, I think one thing worth mentioning is that we were working at a nonprofit, so she wasn't really making out that much money.
I wonder why. It's like
Mm.
it's not the
But
nonprofit.
she didn't need to.
Yeah,
Why is that? Exactly.
so I mean,
Yeah.
I'll go on board and say that right now my student loans are roughly 120K, and I am right now trying to pay off. And at this point, yeah, for that much, I could have had a house somewhere in any other,
Mhm.
obviously not here in California. But now, how is that affecting what and how I live and what I am charging in my practice? Is
Mhm.
I now have to continue to pay back what we have spent to learn this. Because again, there is nothing in our society and structure that is taking care of us for doing this work.
But also,
Right.
too,
Yeah.
not only like having to pay back what you've had to pay to learn, but also what you have to pay to continue to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Right?
licensing fees, board fees, insurance, like all these other fees. Again,
Mhm.
grad school did not prepare us for it. They didn't break down a budget of what it takes to start a private practice or even maintain your license. There are all these other fees that we have to be aware of. Continuing education
But you can learn that.
is not free.
You can learn that if you pay $500 for a 2-hour seminar, though, like how to open your own
So
practice.
and
Yeah.
and to expand here more, just from the licensed psychology side, which for people who may not know, listeners, so for a psychology degree, you typically need a doctorate, which is a freaking journey in itself. Expensive. In the spirit of sharing, I owe close to 500K at this point, I think. And by the way, that amount, yeah, it's in the average range with most people who don't come from means and they've got loans and stuff in our line of work. So here's a perspective. So national, I'm licensed in multiple states. Just because I like having backups. I'm licensed in Canada and California, Nevada, Michigan, Kansas, and Alabama. The cost to get licensed in Alabama, in Kansas, and in Michigan, we're talking about less than $100 every 2 years, right? In California, it costs me
I'm
nearly $500 to get licensed, and then renew it every year. The
Yeah.
liability insurance costs around $800 if you're lucky, right? I think it's every year. So, for example, I have attorneys who seek me out from different states, and I have to maneuver the cost based on the cost of living in different states. Mind you, living in California, cost of living, right? It's not
Mhm.
responsibility of the clients, but I'm like, well, again, I can't live with like crumbs if I'm gonna be living here, for example, right? Even if I lived in Alabama, where it's like not as costly to live, but still, it's like, well, shit, with the amount of payments that I have to cover for, like, the back office side of things and all that stuff, it gets pricey.
Mhm.
And in many ways, that's also going to affect our ability to be able to have a relationship with our clients.
Mhm.
Because here's one of those other things, because we've talked a lot about money and we talked about the structure. But one of the other big things that also when it goes into learning to do all of this is we are the tools which we're generally using to do the healing.
Mhm.
And our own bodies, our own mental capacities have their own limits. So,
Yep.
yeah, I work generally 4.5 days out of the week. Those other days off, if I'm not spending them on my podcast, I'm trying to unwind from the emotional energy and labor that all my clients are bringing to me so that I can
You know,
be
thank
ready to
Yeah.
go and help my clients the following week.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I almost forgot. And I did earlier this morning. I read this article that talked about how a lot of BIPOC mental health providers are just done. They're leaving their
Yeah.
practice or whatever because there is this. For some reason too, we have this sense of like there aren't that many people like us, so it's up to me to be able to help. And then so that it's a huge burden for us to carry. We're not able to do it all. And when we try to sometimes talk to colleagues about how stressful a situation can be, they just don't really understand. Like I remember when the previous president was newly elected, there was a lot of people. I was working at a nonprofit, so a lot of our clients were solely Spanish-speaking individuals who were not here legally, and even if they were, they had family members who didn't. So everyone, especially in California, was and like something like close to the border, everybody was panicking, and then so like for 2 weeks in a row, we were talking about this in
I know. I
my
saw
thing is
that.
gonna.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just gonna be a voice after this, you guys. My apologies. But yeah. So after like for 2 weeks, we were talking about how to help our clients and what to do, and one of my colleagues was like, "Why are we still talking about this?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Because people are still concerned."
Yeah.
Like it doesn't go away just because we talked about it once. Like even though it doesn't affect us, it's really affecting the people that we work with. So like it's important for us to talk about it.
And on another level, that also comes back to what the problems with when manualized evidence-based therapy does not fit with our client in the
Mhm.
standpoint. The manual says that after doing this intervention, this is supposed to be gone.
Yeah.
This is not ever supposed to ever come back up.
Mhm.
That is not how a living being actually functions. That is how a ones and zeros functions.
Well,
So,
that's how
and,
the pathology functions.
That
It doesn't. It doesn't. The manual doesn't really understand like things like systematic racism, white supremacy, all these things that could be impacting our client. So I like the metaphor. I forget she's a TikTok therapist. I want to say like Dr. Raquel Martin is her name. She had this great metaphor. If that whole like all of your troubles are like represented in a glass jar or in a glass cup. And if you hold the cup, like your arm's gonna get numb after a certain amount of time because of all the stuff you're carrying, and sometimes
oh
don't.
yeah, yeah.
Well, she has this metaphor about sometimes like things like systematic racism or micromanaging stuff and white supremacy, it likes to take a pencil and stab the cup. It likes to stab it and
Nice
tries
one.
to break the cup. And it's not just that the manual stuff. It doesn't talk about the stuff that's trying to stab and break the cup at all. We are the ones that are trying to make that up as we go along.
Since with the battery depleting from Elizabeth's side, I'm just going to share two things in case we're pretty much wrapping it up. In case I don't know, leave it to Liz. There's a former mentor of mine who she's close with colleagues that are heavy in the stats, and I knew some of them. So I love her. She would say she passed away some years ago, and she would say, "You want?" If she quoted a colleague of her that she loved the quote, and she said, "My colleague is really great with stats, knows his stuff." He would say, "You want evidence based? Ask the client how they're feeling. That's your evidence right there." I would say that from having looked at the different measures, just in case for like attorneys and legalities, there's a lot of measures that really suck out there. That I'm like, how in the hell is this shit made a measure? And the to your point, yeah, that was essentially, I forgot the other piece, but yeah, that you want evidence based. Ask how someone is feeling, because it's even a measure is not really the holy grail to assess or a manual, because you're gonna miss some stuff that is not a. There's always confounding variables in measure and manuals.
Exactly. They're going to fall away and have to be fall away if you want sort of a quantitative versus a qualitative study.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
one of those factors again that comes back to our field, and I know we've mentioned it, is what we had to do is for our traineeships and internships, working for our various agencies, also unpaid, which also affects that standpoint of us being able to pay back the loans we're putting on our education. I will go on front. I had friends who helped me cover my bills and so forth, but at the same time, I went on food stamps. I had to get the basic medical coverage of Medi-Cal here in the state just to take care of myself while providing mental health services. So the idea that just because I was in this field, just because I was in an agency, didn't mean that there weren't needs that weren't being taken care of. And in taking care of those, I had to go to public services. Because of those things, I wasn't making a lot of money to pay back these student loans, let alone just myself there before I even got to work and open this business.
Yeah, and I think,
And it's funny because
sorry. And I think what a lot of people don't understand whenever we do try to make up our fees or try to establish like this is how much I charge, there is a lot of mental load that goes into this work. And also, not to be like braggy, but my self-worth is worth a lot. Like I have to justify doing this job and sitting across from someone who's discussing their trauma and discussing their history and dealing with all that, whether it's bad or good. I have to put in so much energy into this job that's really what the fees are for. So I don't resent the job. I don't resent my client, and I don't regret like going down this path, and
thank you for saying that.
Yeah, without the fees, it just doesn't make sense.
No, and to your point, this is the thing I forgot. And I owe psychology, and I had to know this because for the licensure, I don't know why. And so, there's a measure, a theoretical assessment that is based on evidence from the IO side it's a measure, but it has two sub-scales in it. One is measuring the amount of work that you're doing, and another one measures how if you feel valued. And they have found results supporting that they have to equal, like they have to match. I forget how the scale is done, but basically, like if you're doing a lot of work, say in a company, you're being overworked, which is like emotionally from the therapeutic side, pretty much equal, right? It's similar. And you're being underpaid, you start to feel like crap. So you have to make it a little bit as equal as possible to be able to maintain a decent quality of life as a provider as well, to avoid burnout essentially.
Which is horrible, because places that are lower cost for clients are those places that you're talking about, are the places that they want you to have 60, 70 clients in your caseload, see them all, be okay, do the meetings, do a bunch of like other things as well. And that's just impossible for a person to do. That's why you get burnt out, and then, or why the services are not, the greatest, because you're not at peak.
Well, and that's
because you have other things in your own personal life. We're human too, there's other things that we need to take care of. So I do not want to take too much of everyone's time, because I know it's very valuable, and I want to give you guys enough time to rest. But I Really enjoy having this conversation with you. And there was other topics that I wanted to touch on, but I think there will be part 2 of this panel, I think, for us to be able to actually cover them. But before we go, I want us to talk a little bit. So for the people that may be looking for someone to reach out to, can you guys talk a little bit about what your work involves and how people can find you? Ed, you go first.
Oh man, like put me.
I volunteered you. Come on.
Yeah, I was thinking, like, how the heck do I describe myself? So I'll say I'll say it this way. Um, I'm gonna get rid of the orientations that I use, therapy wise and all that stuff. Uh, Human. That's basically how I'll describe it. I, I don't use the word expert. I think it's kind of BS, just even legally. So I just say my specialty. My dissertation was kind of my specialty. It's on attachment theory, not the holy grail for anybody who's hearing into this, because there's a lot of like popular now, like, oh, my attachment theory is this. Like, hold on a minute. It gets complicated. It doesn't define you, but my dissertation was on attachment theory, self-compassion, and acculturation. Mainly, I'm a Mexican American, so mostly anything around that side I work with. Uh, Immigration stuff. If you need any resource for that, or like an attorney or like a provider who can do assessment nationwide, I can help you with that. If I have some knowledge with some people who do intellectual testing, I have my views on it. Very culturally biased. You have to. My suggestion for people who are hearing into this, if you're looking into getting a therapist, shop around. Not I have fired, I would say twice, 2 providers that I've met. When I met them, I was like, oh, I met this one and this one. Who do I like? Yeah, screw this one, because he said something that was really pissed me off, and I kept with this one. And that person stayed with me for like over a year, was significantly helpful. If you're concerned about the degrees, don't worry about it. Just focus on the provider. If they're helpful, screw the title. Just get.
Well, yeah. I'm sorry. I really want to say you in that because I think that's very important. Don't focus so much on what degree or what letter come after their name. Focus on the experience that they have and how comfortable you feel with them.
Yeah, that's essentially it.
Wait, where can people find you?
Oh, I don't really do much YouTube anymore. Too many ideas, and it's exhausting to edit the videos and stuff, so I can't get up on it for now. But you can find me on Dr. Deanda Mental Health on YouTube. A few videos there, including Liz. Liz has my channel there. And I speak kind of truth in my videos. I'm not trying to kiss anybody's, like, you know what, boards or whatever. Internationally, I grew up in Mexico. I don't have, I respect the law enough not to get in prison. I'll say that, okay, or sue. And my website, you might be able to find it, psychologytaskforce.com. You can contact me there. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Liz, and I'm sure she can help you get a hold of me. Usually easy to.
Of course, I can do that for a fee. I have student loans to pay.
I know,
I'm just
right?
kidding. Yes, I will be happy to do that. The link will also be at the description of this of this video as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Clark, would you like to go next?
Yeah, as I said, I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm in private practice in the Silicon Valley. I also do telehealth across California. Areas I tend to focus a lot on are working with men, working with LGBT as well as BIPOC individuals. I do some individuals and couples work, occasionally kids. I also have my podcast, Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered, which you can find on any of the podcast areas. And I'm trying to, and I get a lot of work around things such as trauma, such as grief. I do not do personality work. There are others who are much better at that, and I will, if you come asking, I will direct you to them. Because my goal here is to get you to somebody who can help you, even if that's not me. But if I can help you, we'll work things out. That's what I have the ability to do and the power to do in my private practice. So, but we have to have a conversation first. So, want to have that conversation? Come talk.
Miss Olano?
My name's Stephanie Olano. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the Bay Area as well. I've been doing telehealth since the pandemic, since 2020, and been loving it ever since. I mainly specialize in, it's kind of changing. I used to specialize with teens and college students, but now I'm having such a passion for neurodiverse folks, especially those newly diagnosed with ADHD, and those who are struggling with things like imposter syndrome, anxiety, depression, burnout, whether it's in the tech industry, higher academia, just in their work setting in general, and just figuring out who they are as a person, and if they're struggling with, just feeling and sitting with themselves for, with the discomfort or whatever's kind of showing up in their body. So I'm just loving every minute of it, and I'm surprised that I'm moving away from teens and talking to more adults nowadays. I mainly work with Latinx folks, but I seem to have a niche with Latinas or femme presenting people, whether it's LGBTQ or non-binary folks. And yeah, they seem to be gravitating toward me, and I really appreciate that.
Oh, to your point, I'll just say this: adult for kids too. Huh.
Yes. I also do some inner teen work. So if you just want someone to talk about like geeky stuff, nerdy stuff in a decolonized lens, come hit me up. You can find me at thodostherapy.com or at Thodos Therapy. I'm also launching a coaching service where I talk about financial trauma and anxiety. So if you're excited about that, you can look up Awkward Money. That's where you'll find me as well.
And your
Oh, that's
podcast.
awesome.
Oh, and my podcast. Yeah, if you want to hear other therapists talking about like how it's weird going into grad school and mental health and how to set up their business and all the failings that I had, or you just want to listen in on what therapists talk about, check me out on Spotify with Struggle Food for the Soul.
I love your inclusion of the word decolonize. That was, man, you have a way with words. I love it.
Oh, thank you.
That's why I love doing this. I learn from you guys for free. Thank you. Miss Boone, I do not know how to pronounce your last name.
Boontarika Scripton. So I just want to kind of preface first. I'm having like autistic overwhelm. I'm sure you saw the whole thing happen the entire time we we're talking. It's just very overstimulating with many voices and noises. And so I'm really sorry that happened, but it was really hard for me to track the conversation. And then I don't really know when to talk, so I couldn't. But I think that's good representation. I don't think there's a lot of autistic Asian people brave enough to like even name it and say that this is what's going on. So like, anyways, that's the side thing. So now that like there's a big pause and I know that this is my opportunity to speak, like turn taking. This is like, I know this is my time. I'm allowed to speak right now. So I have a background in education and psychology as well. I am not licensed, but I am kind of like the intermediary for people who seek help in some way. I tag team a lot with therapists by helping a lot of neurodivergent people, a lot of trans and non-binary kiddos who are creative are also autistic. And so I kind of weave that together with a creative mind and working with parents as a parent coach. And so I do a lot of family work in terms of surviving schools, advocacy and education systems, and working with the educators, schools themselves, or nonprofits who are trying to be more inclusive and understanding in their practices of how to help everyone just learn their best ways of learning. I am also a fellow geek. I think all of us are here. I'm actually guessing everyone here is an ADHDer, and I'm like, everyone else is like at the speed of light type of dynamic and sharing information. And I'm not just a person here like, ah. So anyways, I like the dynamic. It was fun to see like, I'm observing you guys.
It's called multitasking.
Yes, love the quickness of cognition. It's amazing. It's a gift. At the same time, I know that I can offer the slower paced perspective when there's time for me to share. Oh, I have a channel, organized messes. Most of my socials are organized messes, and I interview also. I do a lot of used to make content on personality psychology. I know some people do follow me because I'm like one of the few Asian people talking about personality too, because we're not shamed into pursuing doctorship and stuff like that. And so it is a brave thing. Like we mentioned earlier, all of us are being brave here to do the things that intergenerationally, like we have this opportunity to pursue excellence however it may manifest. At the same time, we had to fight and battle shame, collective shame, because we know that you'd want to please your elders, you want to make a name and be prideful in that, but we chose this, and so we're layered with a lot of things that we're constantly sorting through, right? And so I think all of us here are representing so much. However we decide to speak or stay present, I think it's wonderful. And I want to start interviewing content creators and streamers. And so I just want to put that out there. If anyone's watching, and if you're a streamer, I want to learn more about the psychology of streaming. And because as an autistic person, I love the parasocial relationship where you're doing something, I'm doing something. We don't actually have to engage to be social, and it feels right. It feels good. And it counts as being social to me. But we need to explore that some more and have those conversations. So that's my thing. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for sharing that as well. Because yes, we were all very excited and trying to like talk over each other and share what we wanted to share. But part of the reason why I invited like each person here individually is because we have slightly different personalities and we cater to different things, and that's what I love. Like I want people to see that regardless of what letters follow your name, you're a doctor or not, or you're licensed or not, there is something out there or someone out there that can offer you the support that you need, right? So you can reach out to any of these lovely folks for either collaboration or if you have any other questions about their actual therapeutic practice. And again, everything is going to be shown at the description for this video. So check that out. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for spending so much of your free time doing this with me. And I look forward to collaborating with everyone here again in the future. And I think, yeah, that's it. Yeah, so you can also check out some of the things that my nonprofit is sort of like starting up, and we're doing live things in the Central Valley. So check that on the website, like for all the details on where we're gonna be, when, and what we're doing. You can also check out the socials. Everybody here sort of has a social, and there's so much sort of information that we post. And so yeah, follow everyone here so you know when everything is released and stuff.
Can I ask you, Liz, something
Sure.
in terms of future of it? Okay, so would you just bear with me on the question? Would you be open to having some people come aboard to have these discussions who is opposing some of the views that are shared here?
Well, yes, of course, because that's how we learn, right?
Okay, so that being said, I'm gonna share something. You can edit it out if you like after. Is that okay?
Okay.
All right. So for people who may be interested in joining these conversations, maybe having a difference in opinion, I would say I think Liz would be open to have you join. I'll share this. We don't have to be on the same page with things. I think human existence is a lot greater than that. They're just differences in opinion, right? There was some stuff that here were shared that are not from my not of generation, but from my philosophy or perspective. I would say that sometimes things that can be true to us, it can be a matter of perspective, but just because it's not true to you doesn't mean that it's wrong. I'll say that. Okay. It's a matter of because here's the thing. For people who say like, oh, it's just words. There was some qualitative research showing a while ago from a professor who I knew that she did a qualitative study on multilingual individuals, meaning patients, and they was found that emotions actually lie in the primary language. So sometimes actually words can have a power to them, right? So I think it would be interesting and and help to the progression of our society, if you will. Also, not even if you will, like I think that's actually pretty much factual. If you have differences in opinion, it would be good to have you join us, and we can further talk about this stuff. Just healthy, growing, and so that we can expand and be in greater mutual respect and kindness to each other. That's just what I'm thinking, because there's some colleagues that I think I have in mind. I'm like, they're gonna get annoyed when things that I shared, or there's some colleagues here that who shared certain things, and I'm like, you know what? My perspective is, I think you'll be fine. You'll be able to survive, even with other colleagues having differences in opinion in you. Uh, Put kindly, get over it. But I think it'd be helpful to have you join if you find what we've said kind of controversial. Hey, you know what? More than merry to have a conversation about this in the future. Is that fair to say, Liz?
Yeah, because again, this is why I'm trying to do this, because I'm trying to show sort of like different, like what happens behind the scenes. Because a lot of clients, when they're trying to reach out, they just see
Agreed.
100+ sort of sign on people's websites, and they're like, "Well, what is this? Why can't I afford this?" And so this is gonna,
Yeah.
I hope, sort of a brief glimpse as to what we are dealing with as therapists, to sort of like try to integrate ourselves more into the community. And again, there's many different types of therapy, there's many different types of therapists, many different opinions, and so we need
Yeah.
those therapists, because somebody will benefit from seeing them as well.
Agreed. Yes, I would just final thought. I would love it if your conversation, if our discussions were CE approved. I mean, this is really culturally enriching. I learned a lot of stuff. Honestly, I've heard of the term IPOC before. I didn't know what it was. Now I'm like, oh damn, like I got updated now. So it is helpful, but the whole thing is like, be brave enough to open yourself, even as a seasoned provider, to talk about this stuff, even with us, okay? Because we don't know everything. Society is always evolving and stuff, and we're progressing. It'd be helpful to have you join with us.
Yes. So if you're interested in, being part of the panels or joining us, you can, I will have a link to my website, and there is a link to my email there as well. Or you can just reach me through social media at Psych for Geeks. Yeah. So just as a closing thought, again, thank you so much for joining. And if you made it this far into the panel, and thank you for staying, even after my camera decided that it was not going to work. And if you have any questions, please write it in the comments. That way, maybe in the next panel or in the we can answer some of those questions for you. And hopefully, once I learn how to live stream these, we can do that. That way, we can answer questions as they're being asked. So yeah, stay tuned for that, and don't forget to reframe and re-enchant your life.